Hi, I'm Meggy-Kate Gutermuth, and I'm here with Pretty Vacant Scene to interview Alabama Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. I'm sitting here with,
Shay Farley, I'm the legal director here.
Noah Jones, the policy advocate.
And Melissa McNeil, the development coordinator.
and thank you guys for being with us today. Could you please just give us an introduction and tell us about who you are and what you do?
Sure, I'll start. I'm Shay. I joined the staff almost 10 years ago. August 1st will be my 10th year anniversary here. And I coordinate our economic justice projects as well as criminal justice initiatives. And I'm the chief lobbyist for the organization as well.
I'm Noah Jones. I've been here 5 whole months, so I'm brand new. I'm a policy advocate. The areas that I'm over are school breakfast initiatives. We're trying to expand breakfast for students who are low income, who would normally qualify for free and reduced breakfast. Also working on our immigrant justice project that has several facets, but trying to make the laws more fair for immigrants, regardless of their status as either legal or documented or undocumented. So.
And I'm Melissa, and I'm the development coordinator. I've been here for a year and since some change, I guess. And what I do is I try to get the notoriety, marketing out about Appleseed, and try to get the funds in so that these people can do what they do.
That's wonderful. Can you tell us what states you're located in with the Appleseed Network, and if you're working to establish new Appleseed organizations within the United States?
Yeah, so Appleseed Network was established in 1994 by a group of Harvard law graduates. They convened for their 35th law school reunion, and they said, you know, we've made a lot of money and we've done good work, but there needs to be more outside of the legal network, so outside of just litigating issues, because if the law's not there, you can't win your case, right? So what they decided to do is start just like that Johnny Appleseed model says, you know, you bury a little seed and let it grow. So that's what they started, and our state formed in 1999. Alabama Appleseed started in 1999. Right now there are 17 centers, and we're actually international now. We have a center in Mexico City. So in the southeast, we have South Carolina, which is one of our, I call it my model organization, along with Texas and Nebraska. Those are kind of the larger centers. We have one in Georgia that's been around probably 6 or 7 years.
Wow. And are you working to establish new ones in the country, or?
Well, we don't really have much control over that. We do have our national Appleseed, and I should mention we're all independent.
Yes.
So we each operate through our own board of directors. We choose our own projects and staff, and completely independent, though we do collaborate as a network in a lot of the centers. Like I said, my projects are economic justice. Texas and South Carolina both work on predatory lending like I do. Consumer debt is one that's spreading, and a lot of centers work on the juvenile justice and criminal justice aspects. So as far as new centers, I would love there to be one in all 50 states, but I don't know what the plans are, or at least I haven't heard of one. So.
Can you tell us more about your Mexico City?
I just know that Maru is the executive director. I wish we maybe communicated a little bit better, but see, since we're not all of the executive directors, in fact, one reason my executive director isn't here today is he's at the convening. They meet quarterly.
Okay.
At the national board meeting every year, they meet, executive directors convene together as well to share more. But I know that they're working on various projects there, but I don't even know what each center specifically does. I just know the ones that are working on things that we work on.
Okay. Can you explain for us that do not fully comprehend and understand how these issues are decided upon and lobbied in our legislature? Can you give us a brief explanation of how this functions in our country and what you as advocates are up against?
Sure. I'm going to take the first part of that question. Why don't you shield the second? I'll start by saying that Alabama Appleseed chooses its project. Our mission is to work for systemic policy reform, and that word systemic is very important because you can't solve poverty by handing out a $5 bill, but you solve poverty by fixing the systemic issues, lack of education, lack of job opportunities. Our criminal justice, for instance, project shows that people can't get employed even if their crime was committed when they were 18 and they were incarcerated and served their time and they're 54. A barrier to employment is the fact that you have a felony conviction, even if you've carried the steady road since. Another issue with economic advancement is the predatory loans. I mean, we live in Montgomery, drive down Atlanta Highway or Fairview Avenue or Southern Boulevard, and you'll see our communities are plagued. And so what we try to do is we attack those elements at their root to pull the whole thing out. So that's how we choose our projects. We have about 6 or 7 current projects, and I would like to hear what you have to say since you're brand new and what drew you to the organization.
Yeah, one of the great things about Appleseed is, you know, as Shay's already mentioned, and really the founding principle behind the Appleseed Network and the Appleseed Centers is that you can litigate all you want, and certainly in the U.S. we have a history of great cases that make great change. I mean, Brown v. Board of Education is just one of the ones that just literally pops off the top of my head, and that made a difference. But it only makes a difference to an extent, because even if the court orders integration, then you'll have schools and officials try to comply with the law, but as little with the law as they possibly can. And sometimes we need to change the laws themselves, not just have big court cases, not just win a decision here or there, but we need the actual base law to change in order to get over those systemic barriers to people being able to have justice, a fair chance, economic development, just a chance to be able to pull themselves up. We're all about trying to empower people through policy changes, through legal changes, so that all Americans, and specifically we're targeting Alabamians, but all Alabamians have a fair chance to have justice and the economic prosperity that they can seek on their own. One of the big barriers that we face in Alabama is, to put it bluntly, it's sometimes the people. We were talking before the interview started about the fact that sometimes we have officials who maybe don't see the need to have fair policies, and sometimes people hear that word fair and they hear like wealth redistribution, they hear all these this liberal agenda, and we're not looking for necessarily redistribution or super liberal policies. We're just looking for fair and even ground for everyone, so that no matter where you are, no matter where you come from, you're able to start on the same ground. And so in Alabama, we've got a long history of not having that level ground, and so we work primarily Shay through the legislature to try to change laws. She does a lot of lobbying throughout the whole session. And of course, lobbying sometimes has a negative connotation to it. Our lobbying is not the walking up and handing the envelope full of money. Our lobbying is walking up and handing the handout that explains why we ought to do something, and we try to win the hearts and minds of the legislature to do the right thing. We also work with state agencies and corporations and all sorts of entities, anybody who really will work with us to try to make policies fair, make regulations fair, make laws fair. But again, in Alabama, sometimes you have that mentality that less government is better. And the reality is, it's not so much that people really believe that less government is better, it's they believe that less government that helps other people is better, and more government that helps themselves. And trying to help people understand that all of us do better when all of us do better is one of the biggest challenges I think we face. So,
Melissa, do you have any thoughts on that?
No.
Okay. I know we're covering a lot of ground and we're stealing your thunder, but I'll add one of the things that is the benefit and why I like Appleseed's network model so much. I guess it's understated, but is because, as Noah said, we'll work with anybody. We use our legal education to really identify the thing that needs to be changed. Is it a statute? Is it a policy? Is it a regulation of a governmental agency? But we convene all of those parties. One of our major successes as an organization was prior to 2006, Alabama didn't have a landlord-tenant law. So there were no rights for tenants. You could literally live in a house where the walls were caving in, exposed wires, no running water, no AC, and we all know what it feels like outside right now. And so we brought together all the various stakeholders to make sure that, to show them, first of all, we did a study of what all 50 states have, to say what we're asking for is not outside the box of reality, or is not some liberal agenda. And then beyond that, we brought together the parties to write the law and then advocated for change. And then Noah talked about how difficult it is at the legislature because we're a different kind of lobbyist. You know, it is so very important that people who are affected by the laws that government makes are not only aware of what's transpiring within the State House, what bills are being offered, and that, you know, as media declines, that's why I'm so glad you're doing this, because we need all sorts of mediums to get the word out. Fewer and fewer people read print newspapers. We're certainly headed towards, I was listening to a live blog of the Supreme Court this morning. Blogging is the wave of the future, and podcasts. And so as the youth develops, we need them to stay politically engaged. And so, but back to the lobbying, is we need for lawmakers to understand, and there are fewer and fewer lawyers in the legislature, we need them to understand that the laws they pass actually affect people. And sometimes it's okay for them to help a governmental agency, or for them to do budgetary matters, or to even give corporations something that they need to thrive. But we can't do it all at the stakes of individuals, all impacting negatively. So I think those are the two reasons I really like working here.
Definitely. And that really goes into my next question. There's a great deal of economic disparity in our country right now, with an ever-widening gap between the top 1% and the disenfranchised 99% who continue to struggle financially. In what ways does your organization advocate for the 99% on a state level and on a national level?
Melissa, you want to start? You've just been occupying.
No, you guys go ahead.
Okay. Well, first let me say that Alabama Appleseed is a state policy organization. We do work some with the national advocacies or agencies if it impacts, like Noah does immigration, so he's monitoring CIR, comprehensive immigration reform. I do predatory lending work, so I'm keeping a watchful eye on what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, does. But as far as national politics, it's not an avenue that we insert ourselves into. However, at the state, we have our own 99%. We know that there is 19% poverty rate over the state. And so we work for things like that affect the 99 here. And some examples, again, are predatory lending, Noah's Food Advancement Project. We have a regressive tax system here. Another one of our colleagues works on the reasons and the needs to change our state constitution, with over 830 amendments in it. And so there's many things, but you know, part of the difficulty that I think that we have is recognizing there are many, many things. There's no shortage of issues when you think about social justice or public policy for the little guy, the voiceless, which is a term I don't really like, the voiceless. Everybody's got a voice, they just need the microphone to speak into, and we hope to be the microphone, I think, to give them the bully pulpit. And to translate that sometimes into, well, if that is the complaint that you have, here's the thing that you need to do. Here's the law that needs to be fixed. And so digressing back, things that we can do at the state levels also to, as I repeated earlier, is to say, or to repeat something I said earlier, is to make sure our lawmakers know that what they're doing has a negative impact, and to mitigate that to the best that we can. Because we're a small nonprofit in Montgomery, Alabama. There's not a lot of nonprofit groups that do specifically public policy or social justice reform. We certainly try to unite those voices to make it a louder, but this isn't in New York or California or DC where those voices are congregated.
Let me put some meat on the bones of that, and just say that, you know, with our specific policies, to give you some examples, with our school breakfast program, everyone recognizes that education is one of the keystones to being able to get ahead, to being able to have economic prosperity in life. And a lot of children who come from low-income, poor backgrounds, the ones that you would typically think of, and I'm mentioning this because it ties in with the breakfast thing, who qualify for like the free and reduced breakfast, education is as critical, if not even almost more so, for them based on the background where they come from. In order for them to be able to overcome a lack of resources in other areas, they need to be able to get the best education possible. And one of the things that we're working on currently that I think will help with that, or we hope is going to help with that, is in order to be able to learn when you're in school, you've got to be able to pay attention. And we all know that no matter what's going on in our life, we come to a task, we can't just leave the baggage of life outside of the task away, and children are different. And so if you come to school and hungry, or you come to school with all these issues going on at home, it's going to affect how you can learn. And one of the things we're trying to deal with is when children come to school hungry, they can't focus on what they're learning. And we can't expect them to. I can't focus if I haven't eaten breakfast, and if it gets past 1:30 in the afternoon and I haven't eaten lunch, you just better leave me alone, because I'm going to be grumpy. I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm not going to get much done. And we found that a lot of the children who would qualify for free and reduced breakfast don't get to take advantage of it for several reasons. They may have to ride a bus that gets them there just in time for school. But one of the things we're trying to do is promote alternative ways for children to be able to access that breakfast. We're trying to get the breakfast not served before school, but during the school day. The first 10 minutes of class where the kids are there, then the kids get to eat. That reduces, first of all, just their hunger, which is a good enough goal, I think, to begin with. But it also helps reduce behavior problems. It helps reduce absences and tardies. It increases concentration, increases test scores. And that's a concrete example of what we're talking about. With the criminal justice projects, especially with employment, you cannot get ahead economically. You cannot improve yourself as part of the 99% economically if you can't get a job. And if you've got that criminal conviction, and that automatically disqualifies you from a number of positions, or automatically people just see that, and you've got to recognize that employers are going to use something to kind of weed through all the applications, and if they see that automatically, then that's just an easy thing for them to use as an exclusion policy. And one of our policies is to try to ban the box, which means the box that's on an application, so that they can still ask the question, have you had a felony conviction? But it's after they start interviewing you. And you're more likely to be able to explain, yes, I have, but this is what I've done to overcome that and change that, so that that's no longer a relevant part of who I am. And when you give people that power, when you allow them to be able to get to an actual interview, then they can get a job, and then they can go forward and be contributing members of society, self-sustaining members of society. One of the biggest problems we have is that people get out of prison and they are so ill-equipped, both by the prison system itself and then by the way we've structured laws and policies, that we almost force them to make it the rational decision that it's easier to go back to crime sometimes than it is to live what we call the straight and narrow. And so those are some concrete examples of what we're trying to do to actually change policies to help the 99. And all of our projects have an aspect of that, but those are just, I think, two good examples.
That's right, yeah. And I'd just like to add the air property one, that little Craig not being here. But that's another one, and it's kind of, because it's not well known, in air meaning someone who has a passed down right to something. And a lot of, to start, I also have air property in my family, because in the beginning, a lot of African Americans especially thought that was a way to protect their land. So even my own grandfather's experience was, if I make everybody a part of the land, then no one person can come to me and say, Mr. Pugh, I'm going to go, or Chris, I'm going to get your land from you, or I'm going to offer you $5 for it. And he could not say to Mr. Vaughn, Mr. A.C. Vaughn, who owned most of the property in Macon County, no, I'm not going to sell you this property. He would have been hung the next day. So to do that, he did that, and it was to protect it for them. But now it's a burden to that family. And so the families don't have rights to the property, not one person. And so that property sometimes is just left there and nothing's being done. Houses are falling down, blighting different neighborhoods. And in some cases, one person may live there, but they can't fix anything, they can't get anything done because they need, in my case, my grandparents had 15 kids. And think about all the great, my grandmother now has 6 generations out there of people you have to consult with just to say, we're going to run running water or dig a new well or to create anything on the property. And so that is something African Americans and other poor people need, that access, and it's wealth. And I think Craig says it's in one plot that they've done, what it was, $1 billion or $1 million.
Yeah, I think it's something to the effect of, in Calhoun County, there are $30 million worth of so this is wealth that you can't access through your land, whether it's, hey, I fell ill and need to pay a medical debt, and so I'm going to go get a second mortgage, or just like Melissa said, you can't even rebuild on the property. So that's very important to helping people become economically secure.
Yes, especially here in the rural South. I would
Yes.
say that's a very, most rural Southern and the Black Belt counties here in Alabama.
What are the most important and impactful actions that citizens can take to make a difference, not only in their community, but in their country? Many Americans can begin to feel cynical when it seems like their local representatives act on their own self-interest and not that of their community. What are the most effective ways that citizens can make their voices heard?
There's a saying, all politics is local, and it's that for a reason. I believe more people, just look at our voter turnout. You mentioned become cynical, and cynicism leads to apathy, and apathy leads to, obviously not going to the voter polls. And there's also a saying, you don't have a right to complain if you didn't take part in the process. I hope people start using those complaints to become and reintegrated into the political process. But going back to what I said about all politics being local, I think there's more people pay attention to who's running for president than who's running for their local city council. First Lady Obama just gave this amazing speech during her tours of commencements, graduation speeches. And she talked about, it's one thing to go stand outside and petition the Supreme Court for a decision you've been waiting on, take the Affordable Care Act, the subsidies decision we're waiting on, or to go out there and lobby and protest for those rights. It's another thing to make sure you're electing people who support those kind of initiatives. And so I would say the most important thing people can do is to become educated on the issues and then follow through by not only reaching out to, there's a fear for some reason in our state. I work a lot at the State House, and I try to bring people to come testify at a public hearing or just call their legislator, senator or representative. And it's like a arm's length. It's almost like I'm asking you to go call a CEO of a major corporation. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, they, pants one legs at a time kind of thing. They bleed like us. They eat breakfast like us. Don't be shied away. So I would say step one, become more educated. Step two, get active. And that activity could be go to your city council meeting. Is there, those decisions, it's great to say we need school breakfast programs. We need to expand access to healthy nutritional food. It's another thing to go to your kid's school and say, hey, I understand there's this program wherein Betty or Tommy can eat after. Would you be interested in doing this program at your school? On down to going, like I said, to the State House and saying, I don't believe in X. I hear all the time from legislators that they don't hear from people. So do you know who wins? The people they do hear from. And most of the times those people they hear from are in direct contradiction to what you would want to happen. And I don't just mean, big pharma or big corporations. I mean anything, because we're not being heard.
Well, and I would just say along those lines, two or three things, but the squeaky wheel, gets the attention and gets the grease, and they do not hear enough from their constituents. And it really doesn't take a ton of constituents getting together and making a phone call, of making a visit to a legislator's office, whether it's the State House or wherever they work at, to really get the legislator's attention, because they hear from so few people that I don't want to put a number on it, but just a few people raising an issue really gets their attention, because they're like, oh, if these people actually are coming and talking to me, maybe they're talking to these other people. And of course, a great example is if you come to them and say, hey, I've been talking to the people in my church or my local organization, and we're all supporting this, then they will pay attention to what you're talking about. Now, they may not agree with you or whatever, but they will definitely be paying attention and be more mindful of your concerns. But not only do you need to talk to them, you need to obviously be educated in who you vote for. You need to follow through, like Shay said, in making sure that you continue to put pressure on, even if your guy or girl didn't win. Then that representative person that did get elected is still your representative. And so you still have a responsibility to them and them to you to make sure that you share your issues and your views for your area. But also, we need more people to run.
Yes.
We need more of the people to actually get out there and run it. And I understand that there's huge psychological and what appear to be economic hurdles to doing that. But if you talk to some of the people who actually get elected, and you're like, wow, how in the world did they get out of third grade, first of all? How much less how did they get elected? It's possible for literally anyone to get elected with the right kind of drive, the right kind of support, and sometimes it just takes the initiative. And so I think those are great things. Of course, you can also find a local nonprofit or organization to be a part of, to be supportive of, find out what they're involved in, whether it's going to their website. You know, a lot of the organizations are on Facebook and Twitter, and keep updating people on the issues. And if you really want to know what you can do, then contact them. You know, I don't know that we ever have a day when we go, man, I really hope no one calls us today to ask what they can do to help. You know, I mean, we would love that kind of thing, and so do those kind of things. Melissa?
And I just like to add, I agree with both of them. I just want to input that there should be another avenue, which is we have a responsibility as well. Those of us who do like politics, who are informed about the issues, to get our messages out. Mm-hmm. The people who, like the lobbyists and people with the machines to make things happen, will get their message out. You know, this is a bad bill. You know, I'll hear on TV, such and such this is a bad bill, Affordable Care Act. This is a bad bill, it's horrible. But then the other side is not doing the same thing with the same tenacity. We're not getting out there translating what we hear to the people to make them want to act. If all they hear is it's bad, then that's what they believe, and then therefore they're going to act that certain way. But there are a bunch of other issues out there that people don't go back and translate that. My mother, for example, is not a person who's going to sit up and listen to talk radio all day. But I do. And so my job is to make sure that I translate to her what the issues are, what's important. Like in this coming up election, why should I vote? Well, this is why you should vote, because you should care about the economics of the city. You should care about whether or not, and if you translate that to any individual. I go to my sorority, and now we go to the projects or to the housing authorities. We speak to people, and you have to speak to them on the things that they care about. You say, well, if they keep doing this, they're going to cut Pell Grant, and if they cut Pell Grant, that means your children can't go to school. What? That's something that you should go, and that's why you should vote, because this is at stake. We have to translate that to them to get them to action. Otherwise, they don't know and they don't care. I'm not turning to C-SPAN. Like my sister said, every time I turn to C-SPAN, it's one man talking, and I all that stuff that you told me you saw, I did not see that. So it's my job to translate that, to spur people into action. I think that's the next thing. Yes, people need to act after that, but they need a reason or a cause to. And I think it's incumbent upon us who are involved in this and can translate it to be the ones to go out there and make that message clearer to them.
That's a good point.
Let me add this too, because that made me think about this. I'm not middle-aged yet, but I'm a younger middle-aged white guy. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know what it's like to be African-American. I don't know what it's like to be an immigrant. I can be sympathetic. I have friends in all those categories, but if I'm going to be developing policies and helping to push and encourage policies that affect those people, not just white dudes, then I need to be able to interact and hear from people who are being affected by those policies. And we try to do that, but there's also a sense in which we need, just like the legislators need to hear from their constituents about the real issues, we also need people involved with us, not just so that Appleseed can get its name bigger, but so that when we develop policies or when we're trying to work to make Alabama a fair, more just place, that we actually do that in a way that really does that affect people in a positive way. I can think of good ideas all the time, but all ideas have unintended consequences, and I may not have thought of something because I haven't experienced a particular thing or the other side of the particular thing. And so when we engage our legislators, we want to not only have our collective wisdom, we want to have the collective wisdom of the people that we are trying to be the microphone for, to give the voice to. And so another just plea, I guess, is people need to get involved with these organizations so that the organizations are advocating for the best thing. Not just what they thought was the best thing, but really what is the best thing for the people on the ground in the trenches.
And it's not just the policy point, right, the initiative, but the message. One of the reasons why I think Melissa was such a great addition to our staff, not just because she's she brings not only, thankfully, the person who's going to help us get money to do our work, but also her perspective as a master's of social work, and worked in domestic violence for a decade or more, working directly with people impacted by her work. And so constantly she's influencing our messaging by saying, well, are you sure you as a lawyer want to, use all that legalese? Cut it down and get right to the heart of it. But speaking of being a lawyer, I want to go back to something, all three of us are very opinionated, and we'll talk to anybody about anything. But as an organization, I just want to point out that Alabama Appleseed is a 501c3, which means we are limited in our political engagements. We cannot support candidates. We are nonpartisan, and I have been very lucky to have partners on my issues at the State House legislators who are on both sides of the aisle. And so while when we talk about things that people, your watchers, listeners, audience can do to be more active, Appleseed as an organization has to kind of maintain that narrow focus. And following up on one other thing that we've talked about, social media is a great platform, but it does carry I think a hurtful element, and I think what we call clicktivism. People think that they see an article or they see a post that maybe Appleseed posts and they like it. They might even share it. But that in and of itself is not activism. Mm-hmm. It's a good start. It's a good way of sharing, as Melissa said, not only educating your friends that may or may not, but the likelihood that you are going to change someone's opinion, especially your own Facebook or Twitter friends, followers, is very limited, and we know that. It is far better to do as Noah said and gather 10 of your friends and host a town hall where you invite your political leader, your local leader specifically, and then state. Don't worry about the national folks. I mean, the fact of you getting to, except for maybe one or two of our House members, to change something that is affecting your daily life is low. Now, Melissa gave a great example with educational grants. That would affect a lot of people. But we kind of know where our national folks stand on a lot of issues. But, we need to be mindful at the city level about parks and green space. And that's a local city council issue. They're the ones who are going to set the zoning. And so anyway, I'll get off that. But I just think the danger of collectivism needs to be recognized. And I'll give Noah a slant here. Part of why you can recognize that that you cannot sit in the stead of a white woman or a black woman or a black man is because you recognize your own limitations. I wish more political leaders had recognized white privilege and all that comes with that before that they tried to speak and say,